So in 1993, I was about 5 years old. I lived right next to a video store, like literally across the street, and they had Super Nintendo games, which was real fresh at the time. I happened to have an SNES because my mom bought me one for my 4th birthday. I played the hell out of Super Mario World and Super Castlevania 4, but we're in the store and I asked my mom if there's a way to play all these games on the shelves, and luckily, they're all up for rentals. So my mom would pay $5 so that I could have a day of fun with such titles as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time, Street Fighter 2, ActRaiser, Super Bowling, Lagoon, Kablooey, oh my mom loved that one, Joe and Mac, Krusty's Super Funhouse, and The Rocketeer, which was $5 wasted because for hours I tried and I couldn't beat the first race! It's too hard! But one game that got my attention there was Final Fantasy II, or as it's really known, Final Fantasy IV. I look at the back of the box and I'm seeing castles and weird monsters, and I'm just thinking that this must be a beat-em-up or something. I had no concept of what an RPG was when I picked up this game. Nothing. So I rent it. I bring it home, I slap the cartridge into my Super Nintendo, and I'm already kinda blown away. I remember thinking, the music is insane! That scary bird monster almost killed Cecil! I was kind of getting the idea of the story and what was happening from the animations of the characters, but I wasn't fully literate yet, and there was a lot that went over my head. Again, I didn't know how RPGs worked, so my first experience with the game was not about buying equipment and upgrading to the best weapons. It wasn't setting up the right formation so that my mages would be in the back row. It wasn't even knowing the concept of experience. I just knew that monsters attacked me, and I had to attack them through a menu, and numbers would show up and eventually they would die. But so would I! So once I discovered that holding the L and R buttons made characters run away, I actually played the game that way. I never bought items and I just ran from everything except the bosses. And through attrition and luck, you can get fairly far that way. I made it all the way to Mysidia and Mount Ordeals, but Mylan would always end me because I never trained for him. Luckily, it was a rental game, so there were save files on the cartridge that made it to the final dungeon, so I got a lot of mileage out of a game that I didn't understand how to play at all. Oh, being a dumb 5-year-old kid. But I of course got a little older and smarter and I started realizing how the game is actually supposed to be played. And knowing what to do made the game 10 times more enjoyable. And let's be honest, I was already enjoying it anyway. And even still, in 2017, oh man, I love Final Fantasy IV. It's not the best game in the series, but I honestly couldn't have picked a better starting point to get introduced to Final Fantasy. Released in 1991, this was the series' first foray onto the Super Nintendo. Everything else was 8-bit before this point, and now with the bigger memory, the script and dialogue could be a lot deeper and feature more complex storylines as well as characters. Nobuo Uematsu had even more freedom to compose whatever music he wanted. And the game just looks fantastic. I love the sprite work, I love the character portraits. Again, I just love Final Fantasy IV. For this retrospective, of course I'm playing the North American Super Nintendo version because that's what I grew up on. But I do acknowledge that it did remove a few features from the original Japanese game, and that its localization is, well, a little sloppy. But it's my childhood, damn it, and that's what I grew up on. So, without further ado, let's get into Final Fantasy IV. Our story begins moments after the Kingdom of Baron sent their special airship brigade, the Red Wings, to the peaceful mage village of Mysidia. And they didn't go there to play hockey. No, the Red Wings went to Mysidia to claim the crystal of water that resides there. Without permission. By force. Like assholes. You take the role of Cecil Harvey, commander of the Red Wings and a loyal Dark Knight of Baron. But despite his loyalties to the king that raised him, Cecil is plagued with doubt and regret. He wants to be a good person, he wants to do the right thing, but today he and his crew had to murder innocent mages and take something that doesn't belong to them. And while Cecil puts on a brave face for the Red Wings, he's sick to his stomach about what he's done. Are you hurt? We're not hurt. How could we be? The wizards didn't even raise their hands. Cecil's not the only one who feels terrible either. There's discontent in the air. The Red Wings hate that they had to do this, and Baron's lead airship engineer, a bearded man named Sid, hopes that the king doesn't plan on using his ships as weapons of war. The king has apparently turned tyrant, and the world is getting more dangerous day by day, as monsters have been appearing more often at an alarming rate. And that's a great opening setup for a game, let me tell ya. Again, I was like 5 or 6 when I first played this game, and I didn't know what to expect going in. But I sure wasn't expecting a story where the main character committed atrocities against his better judgment. As simplistic as the dialogue can be, they do a good job showing the denial that Cecil goes through. First exclaiming, "Never again, even if ordered!" And then the acceptance of his lowly fate. He can't disobey the king. He's just a dark knight. My little mind getting introduced to the concept that maybe just because someone is king does not mean they're always right. That maybe they don't have the best interests of the people in their heart. And sometimes you can actually be the bad guy and do the wrong thing. You shouldn't blindly do whatever someone tells you just out of loyalty alone. Good messages, I think. Anyway, after giving the crystal to the King of Baron, he orders Cecil and his best friend Kane Highwind, a dragoon, to go to the summoner village of Mist to deliver a package. As soon as they reach the village, however, the package activates and releases a whole bunch of bomb monsters which torch and destroy everything, effectively murdering all but one of the summoners, a little girl named Rydia. Jesus Christ! Cecil finally decides that this is the last straw, and he's not doing this anymore. He's going against Baron. He and Kane agree that if they're going to take down Baron, they'll need allies from other kingdoms. However, a distraught Rydia doesn't want to go with 2 knights in scary armor who all but admitted that they killed everyone here. So, in a panic, she summons the Earth Elemental Titan and causes a massive earthquake that separates our heroes and places a barrier between Cecil and his home kingdom. Vowing to protect this little girl and stop the tyranny of King Baron, Cecil goes off on a quest to gain allies and help right the wrongs he's committed. And that's the setup for Final Fantasy IV. Right off the bat, you can tell that Square is a little more invested in telling a story than they were the last 3 games. Even if you're skipping through the text of the opening of the game, it takes like 10 minutes to get to your first real battle. The NPCs do such a good job setting up the atmosphere of the world you're living in, establishing that even though Cecil's a good guy, people are really scared of the Dark Knight of Baron. Cecil! No! I've done nothing! I've never failed to pay my taxes! I was just saying hi, lady. It's okay. I also kind of find it refreshing that there isn't lots of introduction. We're just thrown into this world that's already been established. Cecil doesn't start off at level 1. He's actually a level 10 character when the game starts up. He's already found the love of his life in the White Mage Rosa, and there's no real deep explanation as to how they met, when they started dating, or whatever. Game starts, they're a couple. They're in love. I like that. The way the music is used to enhance certain scenes is so much more thoughtful. From the time Rosa and Cecil are together in their bedroom, to when Cecil and Kane head off for adventure and the traditional Final Fantasy theme starts up. So good! Final Fantasy IV was one of the first games I ever played that managed to grab hold of my imagination and my emotions and just keep me glued to the TV screen, eagerly waiting to see what happened next. It's a really important game for me because not only did it sell me on RPGs, it sold me on the storytelling aspect of what video games could be. You gotta remember, this is the early 90s. We didn't have Metal Gear Solid. We didn't have Uncharted 4. We didn't have these mega blockbuster video games with tons of motion capture and cutscenes. I was raised with the knowledge that stories came in books, and TV shows, and movies, and video games were just that, games. But here I am, loving the characters, listening to some great music, getting good character arcs, and actually caring about what was going to happen next. And that meant something to me, you know? It was like I stumbled onto some hidden gem that most people wouldn't care about. And when I did meet people who liked Final Fantasy IV in school, fuck, that was the greatest thing. You like Final Fantasy? Let's be friends, dude! I'm not gonna lie, I have lots of sentimental value with this game. It's one of the games that convinced me to really get invested into this culture. I wanted to play more video games because FF4 sold me on them so well. I already like them, but this game really helped me love them. But this is still a game, right? There's gameplay, there's a battle system underneath all that story, so let's get into what's new. First off, Final Fantasy IV would be the first game in the series to ditch the traditional turn-based battle system for the active time battles. What does that mean? Instead of picking what all 4 characters will do and then watching it play out, the game is constantly moving. Enemies will always be attacking you. So if you're not choosing anything on the menu and you haven't paused the game, then you're just going to keep taking damage. You make a character do something and they will immediately do that action. Well, kind of. They've also added a magic casting timer to your mages. If you cast a low-level spell that doesn't require too much MP, they'll shoot out some fire or lightning really quickly. However, if you decide to cast any of the more potent and deadly spells, they'll actually take extra time building up the energy to cast it. But the point is that the game's battles are in constant motion. You are still waiting for the menu to pop up so that you can do things, but there's usually something going on at every second of the gameplay. Now this may seem intimidating for newbies, but there are safeguards to make the experience more comfortable. For example, if you enter into a submenu and you're going through items or magical spells, the game stops its action completely until you select something. The game also has a pause feature if you need to stop the action and collect your bearings, and if things are still too hectic for you, you can always go into the options menu to configure the battle speed. The slower it is, the less attacks enemies are likely to do to you. Although personally, I always have the battle speeds at their highest settings, no matter the Final Fantasy. Also, I believe this game is the first one to let you customize the color of the windows. The remake of Final Fantasy II did as well, so you'll notice that when I'm given the option to, I always change the window colors to a nice maroon red. But you can make it whatever you want. You can leave it at blue, turn it green, pink, yellow, but whatever you do, don't change it to white because it clashes with the white text and you can't read anything. In battles, you can't see what commands you're picking or how your health is doing. Although that would make for an interesting blind challenge run, I suppose. But yeah, I really like the active time battles. It still incorporates all of the tactics and status ailments that the previous 3 had, just now with a sense of urgency. This is also one of the only Final Fantasy games to bump the party in battles from 4 characters to 5, so there's a lot of players to manage. Not only does it demand more of the player's attention, but it's just really exciting to play through. This is the most fun I've had with a Final Fantasy since the retrospective began. When an enemy drops a massive spell that kills more than one of your teammates, you scramble and go, "Oh shit!" and struggle to repair the damage while your enemy continues to attack you. I like that when a teammate gets hurt real bad, you don't have to wait for all 4 party members to do their thing, you can immediately send out a healing potion with the next guy to save yourself real quick. A real good on-the-fly dynamic going on here. And with the timing gimmick, they add some new twists to enemy strategies. The first boss you encounter is the Mist Dragon, and at some point he actually turns into mist, and if you choose to attack him while he's doing this, he sprays you with ice damage and makes you pay for it. But you are warned not to attack, and this introduces the idea that the gameplay is always moving. Eventually, the Mist Dragon returns to normal, and you can attack him again. You just gotta wait a little for this one part. Sometimes enemies are going to put up protective barriers and change how they operate for a short while, which always keeps you on your toes, and maybe you'll save attacks for certain moments. It's interesting that as soon as Final Fantasy reached the Super Nintendo, they decided to animate the enemies. Now flying enemies will clearly move and hover over the ground, making it easier to discern what can be hit by the Quake spell and what can't. One early boss is this octopus thing that actually loses tentacles the more you hit him. so the sprite's constantly changing and eventually he's left with only one tentacle on his last legs. You fight one bomb enemy and they overinflate so much that they become humongous! One character can whip up a tornado to protect themselves from danger. It's not much, I know, but this retrospective is about seeing how the series evolved, and I think that's pretty neat. So along the way, Cecil keeps running into a colorful cast of characters who join your party, like the old sage Tella, a master wizard who unfortunately has forgotten many of his incredible spells due to old age. Tella has a daughter named Anna who's run off with a bard named Edward, and Tella needs Cecil's help to reach Edward's home of Damcian in one piece, which means navigating a cavern filled with monsters and... A special field here will protect us from monsters. We can use our tent or cabin and even save. Oh, thank the Lord! Final Fantasy IV finally introduces save points into dungeons. Now it doesn't always take an hour and a half just to reach the final boss of the game. Ugh. Cecil and Rydia managed to successfully escort Tella to Damcian, but luckily they didn't show up early because... The airships of Baron destroy Damcian, murdering most of the soldiers inside, with Tella's daughter caught in the crossfire. This sends Tella into a berserker rage, and all he sees is the man she ran off with, perfectly fine. This buffoon, this irresponsible idiot, you Spoony Bard! What a great line. So I suppose I should mention two things about the version I'm playing. The original Japanese version of Final Fantasy IV had a lot of extra abilities and items that didn't make the cut when coming to North America. For example, Cecil is a Dark Knight, and as established in Final Fantasy III, Dark Knights have the ability to sacrifice their own health to deal out powerful dark magic attacks to enemies, and that's not in the version I'm playing. Tella had the ability to recall certain spells he had forgotten, so he could gain access to them in the early game. Edward's Salve, Rose's Prey, Yang's Focus, a lot of secondary abilities were dropped because Square thought that all these options would just confuse North American audiences, I guess. At least Kain retains the Dragoon's jump feature, and Palom and Porom still get to rock some powerful team-up spells together to deal out a lot of damage. They also dumbed down the items by removing any that caused elemental attacks, and basically turned any specific status-curing thing into a remedy. Gold needles? Oh, they're remedies now. Antidotes? They're remedies too. Softs? My man just used this here remedy to cure whatever. They were easy to get in shops, and they cured every status problem your characters could potentially have, so it was easy to stay healthy. But the other thing about the Super Nintendo version is that the localization was a little subpar. I mean, look, I still grew up on this thing and understood everything that was happening. It's not like it's unreadable garbage that completely destroys the original intent to such a degree that they're completely different games. But yeah, when you're reading the dialogue out loud, you find a lot of sentences that just don't make sense, and a lot of screw-ups that really should have been caught. Wow, you noble looking! Achoo! Achoo! Bless you, Yang. Who is this man? Tella the Sage, Edward's father. Edward's father? Anna and Edward were brother and sister? Oh my god! So it's a pretty quirky version for me to be playing, but I grew up with it and it's dear to me even still. Even with all the versions that exist out there, if I ever come back to this game, I still play the SNES one out of nostalgia. I know, I'm weird. But for non-weirdos, if you get any other version, like the PlayStation version, the GBA, the PSP, the DS, whatever, they retain all the things from the Japanese game and make the dialogue a little better. Although every single version kept the Super Nintendo line, "You Spoony Bard!" because it's so great and you can't help but keep it. After Anna begs Tella to stop, Edward informs everyone that this castle's destruction was the work of the new commander of the Red Wings, a knight known as Golbez. Baron invaded and stole Damcian's Crystal of Fire, and it's clear that Baron is trying to claim all 4 of the elemental crystals for some evil purpose. Tella then dedicates what little life he has left towards revenge, and vows to kill Golbez. But he's going alone. He pushes Cecil out of the way, and he leaves the party, only to be replaced by Edward. Cecil then meets up with his girlfriend, who confirms Edward's story about Golbez, and they journey to the kingdom of Fabul, running into a great martial artist named Yang. All 5 of these guys team up, and now it's time to talk about the one aspect that might be bad for some players. In the previous 3 Final Fantasies, you always had complete customization of your party, and you could approach situations as you saw fit. Whether it was choosing the party in 1, having the freedom to grow however you wanted in 2, or the job class system in 3, players could have different priorities from each other and would approach the game in different ways. Final Fantasy IV, with the great story that it has, and the fantastic music, and the super enjoyable battle system, forces you to be with specific party setups for the entirety of the game. I can't choose to keep Tell of the Sage in my party because story-wise, he's leaving. He's gone. Now I have a shitty bard who runs away from the fight when his health is low, and I can't get rid of that. Everyone's a specific class, so Cecil can't equip magic staffs or ninja gear. He's going to equip stuff that a Dark Knight can use. And the mages? They don't buy spells in shops anymore. Magic shops were a thing in the first 3 games, but this time around, spells develop naturally with level ups. Rydia might advance a level, and then boom, she just learned the ice spell. And that's not up to you. Mages will learn what they learn, simply from leveling up. Everything is kind of decided for you, even up to who the final 5 party members will be when the game ends. So it makes the game a lot more linear and takes away a lot of the freedom that the earlier games had. How do I feel about that? Not too bad, honestly, because again, the overall package is still super satisfying. I love the world and characters and battle system so much that I didn't mind having a more linear railroaded roller coaster ride, you know? It still has lots of optional areas, hidden secret passageways, and challenging extra bosses that I think still gives the game a feeling of discovery and exploration that other linear games might not have. I mean, every Final Fantasy game is linear. It's just this one focuses on providing a very specific challenge to the players. Although there is an argument to be made that by forcing you to play around with specific characters throughout the story, that it's kind of introducing you to all of the different class types. You have to use Kain, so now you're going to know how Dragoons use spears and how they can jump on things. Rydia is a summoner, so you're going to know all about Ramuh, Ifrit, Shiva, and the gang when she's in your party. Being my first Final Fantasy, it was good preparation for the rest of the series and introduced me to a lot of concepts that would help me in other RPGs. So it is a pretty decent starting point. But whatevs, you know, I never minded the linear structure of the game because it's so damn fun regardless. I was never forced to use a crappy party, so nothing bothered me too badly. You use what you got, and what you got is fun. And at least you weren't walking down a boring hallway for 80% of the adventure like one crappy game I know. But I'll get to that when I get to that. Our heroes arrive in Fabul to protect the Crystal of Wind, but unfortunately, Baron's forces are too much and the gang have to retreat to the Crystal Room. And it's at this point we finally get introduced to the villain of the story, Golbez. And as a kid, Golbez was always intimidating to me. I mean, let's be real, he's pretty much this game's version of Darth Vader. He's a tall guy covered in scary black armor who always has this intense presence whenever he enters a room. Like, Golbez has a theme song, right? And it always gave me goosebumps anytime it came on. I mean, look at that sprite! You knew as a kid that this guy was the big bad. He was the ultimate evil that needed to be conquered. And he even steals your girlfriend, too! Oh god, he ate her! In order to save Rosa and stop King Baron before he gets the last crystal, Cecil decides to board a ship and return to Baron himself. But unfortunately, it doesn't go as planned, as a whirlpool appears and out pops the sea creature Leviathan, who for some reason really hates boats and decides to attack our heroes. Everyone gets scattered, and Cecil finds himself alone, stranded on a beach, and the only nearby town is... oh god, it's Mysidia. I love this part. This is one of the instances where the NPCs are so damn fun, and if you choose to skip them and just head for the main plot, you're missing out on something special. Cecil murdered innocent mages to steal this town's crystal, and now he's gotta come crawling back, asking for help to reunite with his friends. And oh, the mages don't like him. They haven't forgotten. One guy sees you, and he instantly transforms you into a toad. Oh god! This is a legit status condition in the game. You go to the bar and the bartender hands you a drink that turns out to be poison. He legit poisons you just for talking to him. And then there's this sexy woman hanging out in the bar. Ooh, she's a dancer. She wants to give Cecil a show. Well, when in Rome. Although now I'm getting a little sleepy. My eyes are getting heavy. I guess I'll just fall asleep. Cecil wakes up outside with an old woman standing over him, and he's been turned into a pig. Oh my god. And then the old woman laughs and bounces away from you, leaving the town. What did she do to me last night? This is seriously one of the most memorable and fun things I've seen NPCs do in an RPG. Actions have consequences, kids. Karma is a bitch, and Cecil learns the hard way that being the bad guy doesn't work out in the long run. I love it. Groveling to the elder that he attacked before, Cecil begs for forgiveness, asking for help that he doesn't deserve. The elder senses his sincerity, but ultimately tells Cecil that a man who's tied to darkness cannot hope to vanquish evil. Only by climbing Mount Ordeals and overcoming the trial inside can Cecil shed his dark aura and become a warrior of the light. A paladin. Cecil agrees, and the Mysidian elder gives him 2 mage companions in the form of Palom and Porum, 2 kids, one a black mage and one a white mage. And while climbing the mountain, Cecil ends up running back into Tella, who's trying to uncover the secret to the magic spell Meteor, which he believes has the power to kill Golbez. In the end, Cecil makes it to the top, and he is successful. His dark armor is stripped off, and Cecil receives the light that allows him to become a paladin. And now he looks like a proper hero. It was interesting to have a Final Fantasy hero who wore dark armor and utilized dark magic, but now Cecil is becoming the person he's wanted to be this entire time. Cecil's story is ultimately one of redemption, about breaking the chains that hold you and stepping up to do what's right. As a kid, I thought Cecil was awesome. He does most of his moping in the beginning of the game, but even as a Dark Knight, as soon as shit went south, he always did the right thing and didn't second guess himself. Hell, when Edward was moping about how useless he is, Cecil just straight up slaps him and tells him to get over it. It's these character arcs that make this game so memorable. Even the whiny bard Edward goes through a growth, and gains the courage he's sorely lacking when the game begins. Every RPG needs great, memorable characters, and I can honestly say that Final Fantasy IV succeeds in that department. This game is a great amalgamation of the previous 3 games in the series. It has the 4 elemental crystals, it has a lot of the job classes from the 3rd game, it brings back the MP system from 2, and it still retains the chocobo forests and let you ride those yellow chickens again. Along with the fat chocobo making a return, this game also features 2 new chocobos. The white chocobo will refill your MP whenever you catch one, saving you a trip to the inn if you have a white mage in your party. I'm not sure how it gives you MP. Does the white chocobo regurgitate mana into your mouth? If so, it's a little gross. And then there's the black chocobo. This is another one that you can ride, but this bird has the ability to fly, so he can carry you over the ocean and over to solitary islands. Although it does have one catch. It's incredibly shy and likes to hide in a forest. You can only land the black chocobo in a forest, so keep that in mind. How to breed chocobos. Don't give them any ideas! Oh, and Golbez has 4 minions who work for him and try to kill you throughout the adventure, and they're referred to as the 4 Fiends, and they all belong to a certain element. Mylon of Earth, Kainazo of Water, Valvalis of Wind, and Rubicant of Fire. If you remember, the villains of the original Final Fantasy were referred to as the 4 Fiends, so having a similar group to the original bad guys is pretty great. And they have the greatest battle theme I've ever heard. Okay, I can't keep ignoring this. Final Fantasy IV soundtrack is legendary! Nobuo Uematsu really starts hitting his stride with the Super Nintendo games, and I would dare say that 4 is the best soundtrack of the SNES games. I like this soundtrack more than the first 3 games. I think it edges out 5 and 6's music too. It's amazing the atmosphere he can create for this game. I've still never heard a better cave theme in my life. I can't help but love this game, man. Is the game difficult? It has its moments. For the most part, I'd say it's not that hard, but again, I play at battle speed 7, and I do think that near the end game, they start dropping some really annoying enemy encounters. Malboros are assholes. They always start the fight with bad breath and turn one of my guys into a backstabbing mute frog. The Coeurls, or Black Cats as they're localized in this game, are like the mages in Final Fantasy I. Dicks who always one-shot my party members, killing them in one hit, pretty much making me decide, you know what? Fuck this! And I just run away from every one of them. The Behemoth? Oh god, this guy hits like a truck. Jesus, I hated being forced to fight these things in Bahamut's cave. Occasionally bosses would catch me off guard in the heat of the moment too. I'm fighting the Magus sisters, right? These 3 ladies, Sandy, Cindy, and Mindy. And I gotta kill Cindy first because she's like the white mage of the group and she'll bring the other sisters back if I kill them first. But as soon as I order Tella to drop a Fire 3 bomb on her, Sandy casts Wall on her and it ends up bouncing the spell back at Sid. Oh god, Sid, I'm so sorry! Oh yeah, Sid's a party member in this game. First time for the series. He beats people up with a wrench. I know some people don't like fighting the evil wall. It's this boss who's constantly moving towards the characters throughout the entire fight, and if he reaches you, he starts insta-killing everyone in the party. So you actually have a time limit to kill it as fast as humanly possible before it murders you. Yeah, he can be a bit scary, but he's not as bad as the optional boss, Plague. Plague only gives you 10 seconds to kill him. What an asshole. I think this game has its difficult moments, but you know what I really appreciate? As long as you're fighting every enemy encounter you get enough experience to just coast along with the story, and you barely stop to grind at all. I only stopped to grind in this game 2 times when things were getting a little intense. And you know what my clock was when I reached the final boss? Keeping in mind that I've played this game before dozens of times and that I fought all the optional bosses? 20 hours. I blew through this game in like 5 sittings and barely grinded for most of the adventure. That's some fantastic pacing, and I think people will enjoy that it's not too grind heavy like the first 3 games. Oh, there's so many things to mention about this game. You know how in the first 3 games there were dungeons with lava that you had to intentionally walk into to get through? Well, in this game, they introduced the float spell, which allows your characters to hover above the ground and dodge earthquake attacks. But it also lets you avoid damage from floors that might burn your feet in the bonus caves. See? These guys are smart. They don't just walk into lava because why not? There's a character who gives you a rare mineral so that a blacksmith can make one of the best weapons in the game for you. And all he's asking for is a rat's tail. Just like Bahamut in the first game. But anywho, I gotta wrap this up. I've said so much already. Cecil and his friends are too late to stop Golbez from collecting the 4 elemental crystals. They also discover that the King of Baron was a fake this entire time, killed and replaced by the Fiend of Water, Kainazo. And while it seems all hope is lost, Cain informs them that Golbez only has half of the planet's crystals, and in reality, he still needs to collect the remaining 4 dark crystals that reside underground. Turns out there's an entire civilization that exists beneath the Earth's crust that's home to dwarves. And I really like the dwarves that live down here because they both look like Jawas. And for whatever reason, they really like to say lally-ho in conversations. Lally-ho! Turns out Golbez wants all 8 crystals because apparently it will open up a pathway to the moon. Zuh? Through a series of events where Cecil meets more companions and stops more baddies from doing bad things, our heroes are beaten to the punch yet again when they lose the final dark crystal to Golbez after he uses mind control to brainwash Cain. Once again, all hope should seem lost, but the King of the Dwarves suggests an old folk tale about a magical ship known as the Lunar Whale, a ship that can be summoned through the power of prayer in the village of Mysidia. And why the hell didn't we do this in the first place? Either way, it turns out to be true. The Elder and his mages pray as hard as they can and actually summon the Lunar Whale, which turns out to be a pretty pimp spaceship that has beds and a fat chocobo hanging out in the back. Remind you of anything? To the moon! Yeah, this is a Final Fantasy game that starts off with castles and dragons and knights and wizards, and somehow the story evolves to fighting a guy with advanced technology, discovering an entirely new world underground, and then finally getting a spaceship that can take you to the moon. This shit's awesome! When I was a kid, all of these twists blew my mind. And there were quite a bit because it seemed like every character almost died at some point in the story. Oh no, Pelham and Porum have turned to stone! It's okay, they're fine. Yang kicks everyone out of this room and it's gonna explode! Yang, no! Oh, it's fine, he got saved by a bunch of fairies. Sid sacrifices himself to help us escape the underground. He jumped off the airship and blew himself up. He's gotta be dead. There's no way that— son of a bitch, how did he survive that? The only death that stuck and made me feel bad was Tella's. Everyone warns him that using Meteor on Golbez is too much for him. The power required would kill his old fragile body, but Tella's so consumed by revenge that he ends up doing it anyway. And that was the first time I saw a party member die in a Final Fantasy game, and it kinda got me, you know? His daughter just wanted him to be happy, but he went the way of hate and revenge and just said fuck it. And Golbez didn't even die from it. You probably noticed that Rydia's sprite has looked different in some of the battles from when we first found her. Well, she was thought to have died after Leviathan attacked because Yang clearly saw her get eaten by it. It turns out that Leviathan actually dragged her to the underground to live in the land of monsters. A village with a library, shops, houses, but the only things that live here are the monsters that summoners call in battle. So in 4's universe, Shiva, Titan, Ramu, the Mist Dragon, they all live in some underground cave somewhere until they get called to fight. Rydia, being one of the last summoners, gets taken in by Leviathan and his wife Asura, and apparently time accelerates way faster in the monster world, so she goes from a little girl to a young adult super fast, popping out to find that Golbez's war for the crystals is still happening. But yeah, like FF3, this is an optional area where you can fight and recruit Asura, Leviathan, and then on the moon you can find Bahamut, whose Mega Flare still packs a mighty punch. Odin can also be found underneath Baron, and it turns out he's the spirit of the real King Baron who got murdered and replaced by Kainazo? I don't know how that works, but I can roll with it. When our heroes land on the moon, they run into an old man named Fusoya, which sounds like a dragon shout from Skyrim. Fusoya! He's of a race called the Lunarians, which live on the moon, and it turns out what's been happening on Earth is the direct result of an evil Lunarian known as Zemus, who has mind control powers and has been manipulating Golbez from behind the scenes. He wants to rule over Earth and eliminate all the humans who live there, so he needs the 8 crystals' power to activate a monstrous robot known as the Giant of Babel to go around and kill everyone. And since he just got the 8 crystals, he's ready to do just that. But Fusoya also explains that a man named Kluya, who went down to Earth and helped the civilizations build airships and technology, also fell in love with a human woman and had 2 kids. One of those kids was Cecil. But get this, the other kid, Cecil's brother, is Golbez. I am your brother. So thanks to Fusoya, they managed to get inside the Giant of Babel and shut it down from the inside. Golbez even snaps out of his mind control and feels complete regret that he was filled with so much hate and committed so much devastation. He sets off to end Zemus along with Fusoya and make things right. Guess it runs in the family. And I love that throughout the whole game, he's had this intimidating theme song, this badass sprite. He's been the true evil this whole entire time, right? And then when he goes off to kill Zemus, his sprite's all small and cute and chibi. Golbez is just adorable now. Aw, look at the little guy. And though they think they've killed Zemus, the monster's hate is too strong and manifests into the destructive force known as Zeromus, which shrugs off Golbez's attacks because his soul is covered in darkness. But Cecil's a paladin. He's a warrior of the light. So he's the last hope for Earth as Zeromus transforms into a hideous, ugly abomination. Christ.
One ugly motherfucker.
And this is the final boss of the game, and I'd say the hardest so far. Like the Cloud of Darkness, I did die my first attempt at this guy. His Big Bang attack and ability to weaken people to low health is some powerful, devastating stuff. I genuinely think he's harder than even the optional bosses like Ogopogo. Dude can wreck you real quick. But man, that theme song always kept me going. One of the best final boss themes in all Final Fantasy. And that's that, folks. With Zeromus dead, the Lunarians decide to leave the Earth and go back into the vastness of outer space. Golbez, feeling irredeemable and wanting to connect with his alien roots, decides to go with Fusoya. Before he leaves, Cecil acknowledges him with one last sentence. Goodbye, brother. The epilogue that follows is incredibly awesome, uplifting stuff. We get to see how everyone lives happily ever after, while Nobuo pours his soul into the music once again. I remember beating this game as a kid and seeing that Cecil was crowned the new King of Baron with Rosa as his queen, and all the friends he made on his journey showing up to attend his coronation. It was so great. I had never been so satisfied beating a video game before that. Zeromus made me work for this ending, and I felt like I accomplished something great. So yeah, again, I love Final Fantasy IV. It doesn't do anything wrong to me. The dungeons are well paced and feature save points to take breaks now. The combat is incredibly satisfying and makes me pay attention in a way the previous 3 didn't. And everything else about the storytelling, from the animations to the incredible music, are just so impressive and leagues above what other RPGs were doing in 1991. This was an important game for me, and it holds a place in my heart. And I don't even think it's the best Final Fantasy either, so that should hype you up for why I wanted to do this retrospective in the first place. This series only gets better. At this point, you're likely to be able to play FF4 on your toaster. It's on everything. But I will give mention to the GBA and PSP versions because they do have an extra dungeon on the moon, and they actually allow you to swap party members at the end of the game. You can have Edward, Yang, Palom Porom, or Sid in the battle with Zeromus in these versions, and you aren't forced to use the original 5. And if people think the original game is too easy, the game was remade on the DS with polygonal models and even had the occasional cutscene with voice acting. The 3D version adds a lot more challenge and is basically made for the people who grew up with this game. Final Fantasy IV also got a sequel in the form of FF4 The After Years, which centers around the children of our heroes and features pretty much the same music, enemies, and battle system. I always think of it as though Square Enix made an unnecessary fan fiction, honestly. And I don't plan on covering it in the retrospective. I've said it before, but I think Final Fantasy IV is actually a great starting point. If you're trying to get into the series, it's not too hard to be overwhelming, and it does introduce you to the various classes and tactics that you're likely to see in the other games. Its music should astound you, and the gameplay excite you, and the characters really make you happy. And that's all you could want from an RPG. This is a great freaking game that made my childhood, and I am so glad that this was my introduction to the Final Fantasy series. I'm so glad I played it when it was relatively new, so that I could enjoy Final Fantasy VI when it was new, before it was cool because 7 arrived, you know? I always felt like I was one of the cool kids in school who had the inside scoop, like, yeah, I've played Final Fantasy IV, you should play Final Fantasy IV, it's real damn good, yeah. I love this game to death, and if you haven't tried it, you absolutely need to. And that's the best compliment I can give it. But anywho, folks, next month I'm going to be playing the 5th game of this really great RPG series, Persona 5. But in between that game, I'm going to be returning to the job system we saw in 3, so come back next month as I look back on Final Fantasy V. Until then.